You've been in Denver, you've seen a lot of cycles. What feels different about this moment in retail right now?
Given where we are in today's climate, you see retail sales. Gap earnings came out yesterday. They were pretty decent, at least on the Gap side. The Old Navy numbers were good. I think it's hard to develop right now. And I think if you look at COVID and where we had space before COVID, and then coming out of COVID, there was this mad dash for opening stores. And then now we're at a scenario where that's not just our market, it's a lot of markets where there's a lack of really good space,
right?
Any space for that matter. Boxes got eaten up, the better spaces, Cherry Creek's a great example. The development that's occurring there, I've never seen, there's nothing available as far as the inventory. Everybody wants to be in Cherry Creek and the right brands that need to be there. There's no options.
So how did you get into retail real estate?
Right out of college, I went to work for a local developer in Towson, Maryland. I went to Towson University. I had built houses and had gotten kind of involved in real estate through high school and college, and realized that slinging a hammer wasn't what I wanted to do, but was interested in the commercial aspect of real estate and went to work for a small family developer who had 14 shopping centers in the Baltimore area, and wound up leasing space for those guys. Probably a year out of college, had no idea what I was doing. The best piece of advice I got from the owner of the company at the time was pretend it's your own. And I think that piece of advice really stuck with me, and that it made decision making a lot easier. And I was afraid to make the wrong decisions on real estate and investments that they had. When I considered it as my own, It made it a lot easier.
So you've been on both sides, the tenant and the landlord side, and you've repped brands internally, and now you're advising them as a broker. How does that shape the way you work with clients today?
I think it's a unique perspective because it allows me, from at least the tenant side, well, having been on the landlord side first, it was a perspective of being a landlord and an owner. And, when I was at Preet with merchandising malls and understanding how the mall tenants work, and then also understanding how ground up development works when I was at DDR. And the two are obviously a little bit different, but they're the same formula, if you will. The landlord base, the merchandise at the center, the anchors, things like that. I think what was beneficial for me on the tenant side when I was at the Gap was a really unique perspective of working from the retailer's component, traveling with the district managers and the regional managers and understanding from their perspective what made a store work, right? And understanding cannibalization and understanding store placements and understanding customer experience, customer interface. And that to me was invaluable. And I learned not just from their brand, but from any brand, how do you engage that customer and how do you convert that conversion and understanding what that meant. So that was, to me, was just a crash course and almost a working MBA in retail to understanding how that works. And you marry the two experiences, I think it made it, for me, when I went to the brokerage side, I have the ability to look at things through both lenses. And I think particularly, and I love working with retailers and creating the brand, strategies in the markets that I work in with that lens of, let's put a store here. We know the customers are going to come from this area. And of course, they all do their their own research. It's always great to look at a market, understand that market, and then, where's that customer pulling from? And then if we put a store here, how does this store 5 miles away impact that store? And then the next store, like the first wave, then the second wave. So that's a lot of fun. But then the flip side to that on the development end is understanding how the developer sees it from the ground up perspective, from the existing center perspective, and understanding how that works from their end on the financial side of it, from a pro forma of the deals. And it also helps too that I work and I list properties that are, on the landlord side as well.
I think getting that national perspective and then working in your local market, you just have a point of reference on so many things. Like you've seen enough different properties. I think a lot of local brokers could benefit from just traveling and seeing all these different projects out there that the in-house tenant rep definitely gets that opportunity too.
I think that's a really good point. I think that when you look at, when we've been doing it as long as we have, covering a lot of the country, you do get to see a lot of markets, and you do get to see how things work, what works, what doesn't work, whether it's a lifestyle center or an enclosed regional mall or a high street, what brands work, what locations work. That's the fun.
Are you still active outside of Denver?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're doing the work for Olokai and for Bellin, and we get to travel with them, and then other brands that we work with as well. And there's, call it the Mountain West regions for Utah. We do Sephora's work, Rally House's work. I would call it the Mountain region. So Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, a little bit of New Mexico, but in that region.
So tell me about one of the projects you're leasing right now.
Well, a project that I'm working on now is a project that was started by Forest City, probably I built it out around maybe 20, 25 years ago. The shops at Northfield, which, if anyone's familiar with Denver, that was an area that at one point had been the old Stapleton Airport. They built that essentially on one of the old runways. And, it was a traditional Macy's theater kind of barbell anchored center, and with the infill retail around it, and then a power center flipped on either side, east and west. And it was built way ahead of its time. And fast forward to today, we're on our third owner in Stockdale Capital out of LA. This is an owner that now has the ability to really start to see the vision, and the market's grown in around the center. So it's really interesting to see how, like, they call it the Central Park neighborhood, kind of like northeast Denver. And you're seeing that area grow, and you're seeing now the needs of the consumer that are there. So before, when the center was built originally, Forest City was able to leverage a lot of their relationships to get tenants in there that unfortunately didn't do well. And I think what's very fascinating today, as of today, actually American Eagle is under construction in the same space that they were in, that they closed probably 10 years ago, which, as everybody knows, like, that doesn't happen a lot. You don't see a retailer go back into a shopping center that they closed. When I was at the Gap, that you brought that up to operations, they would be like, we're never touching that center again. But this is great because now you're seeing the market's come full circle. So, we signed leases with Wayfair and 140,000 square feet, 2-level store in a former Macy's. That NCAP took that. We've got a Lifetime Fitness that's backfilling JCPenney. So there's a lot that's there, and the small shop space are now starting to fill in with American Eagle and Miniso. Now that initial wave of the anchors has been completed, and now we're tackling the needs of the consumer for the better brands. This is a lot of fun, and we're seeing that center start to really get a lot of interest from a lot of retailers.
It's
nice.
Fascinating to me of the number of centers that were built 15 to 20 years ago that were built in greenfields and similar type of deal. And now finally the numbers are starting to catch up, and they were in the right location. The growth hadn't reached it yet.
It's exactly right. Denver had a lot of that. Forest City built Orchard Town Center on the north side up 25. There's also Southlands, which is on the southeast side of town, which we also work on that one. And that's $1.7 million. That center, same thing, built way ahead of its time. And that's kind of a shadow anchored center with Sam's and Walmart, but it's also got the town center component. So same thing. You've seen that residential grow around it, and now you're filling in with the retail and the F&B that complements the market.
So, you've been in Denver, you've seen a lot of cycles. What feels different about this moment in retail right now?
Given where we are in today's climate, you see retail sales. Gap earnings came out yesterday. They were pretty decent, at least on the Gap side. The Old Navy numbers were good. I think it's hard to develop right now. And I think if you look at COVID and where we had space before COVID, and then coming out of COVID, there was this mad dash for opening stores. And then now we're at a scenario where that's not just our market. It's a lot of markets where there's a lack of really good space, or any space for that matter. The boxes got eaten up. The better spaces, Cherry Creek's a great example, where the development that's occurring there, like, I've never seen, there's nothing available as far as the inventory. Everybody wants to be in Cherry Creek, and the right brands that need to be there, there's no options. But they're being built, and that's an interesting case because that's more of a ground-up development where the developers are being aggressive, but rightly so. The office market's very strong, so I think that correlates and holds well. But I do see that this market still has a lot of retailer demand that's out there. It might have not been, like, let's put it this way, the supply, had we not had COVID, the supply might be greater, and the commentary might be such that the demand doesn't equal the supply. In other words, we wouldn't be in a positive scenario that I think we are in now.
Is the lack of vacancy starting to get some brands to make compromises or get super creative in the real estate they're willing to take? Or are you seeing them just pass more often than not?
I think a lot of brands want to stay true to the brand and want to stay true to their location, so they'll wait. It depends on the brand, and there may be some concessions, that are made, whether it's deal structure, location wise. I've had one brand that looked at Cherry Creek, then looked at Boulder. It was easier to get into Boulder, but decided, let's wait. We want to do this the right way, and we're going to get a Cherry Creek deal done before we do Boulder. And that's just the brand strategy. That doesn't hold for everyone, but they're going to be patient. When you look at the broader spectrum outside of that, I do think it's a function of time. How long do you want to wait? How patient do you want to be? And that goes for both landlords and tenants. The landlord's going to have a vacancy that they can be patient on to fill it with the right use, or they might have a difficult to lease space, and the patience factor is tough. But I think it's creating probably more of a decision tree in how you analyze the real estate and what markets you want to execute first. So, one barrier to entry might be lower in a different market than another market. And you might say, okay, well, I'll do a deal in Colorado versus in California or Southern California or Northern California. So I think it's brand specific, but retailers are more in the.
What are the rents in Cherry Creek North right now on average?
When I started working in that market, the rents were in call it on an average, 40, $45 a foot. Now we're upwards of 80 to over 100.
Wow. And that's by far the highest street rents in the market. Yeah.
In this market, if you discount Aspen and Vail, which are completely different anomalies altogether, yes, it's the highest.
You're a featured broker on Brand March. Why was it important to you to be visible there?
Well, it's all you, Brett. First off, you've done a great job assembling a solid group of professionals that I respect in the industry. And being alongside of them in that venue is complimentary to me, and I love being a part of that. I work and have worked with a lot of brokers that you feature on there. It's great for my brand, my company, and business. It's a great platform. I love what you're doing with it.